Good afternoon. I am very pleased to introduce our next author, Lindsey Frantz. She was born and raised in Appalachia and earned her MFA from Bluegrass Writers Studio at Eastern Kentucky University. Her stories and poems have previously appeared in numerous literary journals, including Mainstream Rags Villains Anthology, Ruminate Magazine, and Emerge Literary Journal. Her first novel, The Upworld, was released from Line by Lion Publications in the summer of 2017. Lindsey loves to eat chocolate, butterscotch, and she loves cats. Please give a round of applause for Lindsey.
Okay, so I'm going to start with, it's going to be a fairly short reading, a little introduction. My novel's a young adult novel, and it's set in future Appalachia. Imagine a few hundred years in the future. There's been a lot that's happened that I will not bore you with right now. Needless to say, there are people with abilities, telepathic abilities, telekinetic abilities, empathic abilities. And this book focuses on two characters, Erilyn and Finley, who kind of have very different paths, and they cross. The chapter that I'm going to read is chapter 3, and it's from Erilyn's point of view. And what's happened so far is, make sure I say this right. We've seen Erilyn, who is by herself. She lives alone in the woods with her cat. I do love cats. with her cat Luna, and they're out on a run. They're looking for supplies from fruit trees and just things that they can gather to eat. And then in Finley's first chapter, he is being chased by Wilden, which are these wild, vicious, like a nomadic group of people, and they're very violent and aggressive, and they've spotted him and they're chasing him. So this chapter begins with Erilyn. She had fallen asleep in a tree while she was watching the Wilden to see if they would leave so she could gather some food, and she falls asleep, and now she's about to wake up. So, chapter 3, Petrichor. The sound of rolling thunder pulled me from my impromptu nap. The storm I'd smelled earlier was close now, the dark clouds making the sky darker than it should be. Above me, Luna was sitting upright, sniffing the air. The smell of rain was thick, and I sighed. One of the first books Rosemarie had given me was a picture of archaic words. There was one word, petrichor, which meant the smell of the earth after a rain. I had hated that page, remembering the smell of stagnant pools underground, until Rosemarie had taken me outside after a rainstorm and sat with me while I learned what petrichor smelled like. We spent many evenings after that, sitting as she taught me this new world using my senses. The thick, damp air hugged me like a chilled blanket. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and my vision sped across the dark golden grass, whipping in the wind from the coming storm. My vision settled faster than I expected it to, and I gripped the tree for balance. Looking not toward the camp, but back toward the trees where I hid, I recognized the tree I was in, the only silver maple in the line. It felt like I was running, heart racing, breathing ragged. I was inside someone else's head. I wanted to pull away, but my vision swung toward the Wilden caravan. Wilden men were chasing me. They were so close, too close, and fear spiked through me, causing me, whoever's mind I was in, to trip. I jerked myself back, reeling against the tree as my meager breakfast threatened to come up. Above me, Luna was staring out across the field, her eyes wide and her ears back. She was growling low and deep. With my eyes, I could barely see the heads and shoulders of Wilden parting the grass, racing toward where I hid. Luna. Her wide-eyed, icy blue gaze shot to mine. Time to go. She moved fluidly down the tree, remaining in the shadow as I made my much slower way down. I hit the earth and crouched next to her. I put my hand on her, both my fear and hers a thick, acidic taste in my mouth. Her aura was a rippling silvery gray. Go, I whispered. She chirped once, then took off into the woods. Even though she was white, as bright as a full moon, she vanished in seconds into the shadows. I was right behind her, moving as quickly as I could. Although I knew they wouldn't see me through the trees, somehow they had known where I was. Maybe they could do what I could, see things they shouldn't be able to see, find me. For the first time, I was thankful for my childhood, growing up in the caves, where I learned how to be neither seen nor heard. I ran, trying to stay on aerial roots and thick leaves to avoid leaving footprints. Clutching my bag to my side, I tried to keep it from snagging on anything and slowing me down. I ran without stopping until I was back in my clearing. Luna chirped from beneath the maple tree. She was safe, and part of the tightness in my chest lessened. I hastily scuffed up the clearing with my feet, trying to hide any evidence of us. They may not make it this far, but if they did, I wanted them to pass by this area like they had the first time I'd run from them. I scattered my apples, hoping they'd look like they'd just fallen from the tree. But if they had dogs with them, they would find me no matter what I did. My scent was everywhere, and I couldn't hide it. I knew my pine tree wasn't safe, so I had to hide under the giant aerial roots of my ancient silver maple. The night Rosemary died, the Wilden had been chasing me. I had tripped in the rain and found this clearing, had hidden beneath these very roots, holding tiny Luna to my chest while the Wilden chased my ghost through the woods. These roots had kept us safe then, and they would keep us safe now. I had to believe that. Just as I rolled under the roots, bag tossed in first, rain began to fall in big, fat drops. I settled back into the shadow and sensed Luna curled in her own hidey hole behind me. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her like a tiny golden sun in the darkness. I reached out my hand to press into her fur. If they had dogs, the rain would help wash away our scent. We had a chance. For the second time, this tree and a rainstorm were going to save us. I had built up the earth around the edge of the opening so that it wouldn't fill with water when it rained. That first night, the rain had filled up the hole I was laying in, and I'd been scared I would drown. I'd held little Luna above the water and made myself not panic for her sake. When the rain had stopped, and I was sure the Wilden weren't coming back, I had crawled from the hole, covered in mud, cuts and bruises, just like the day Rosemary had found me, and had run back to what was left of her house, with Luna held tight in my hands. Rosemary had found me weeks after I'd fled Citadel, curled beneath a thorny bush. Sunburned and covered in cuts and bruises, I'd covered myself in mud to try and block out the sun. I couldn't imagine not being in pain. I'd crawled there so that I could fall asleep and never wake up. Rosemary said she found me because she could hear me crying, but I didn't remember crying. I remembered the way the mud felt as it dried, how it itched, how the tiny little ants had crawled over my fingers and bitten the exposed parts of my skin. She'd carried me back to her home, a rough stone cottage hidden in overgrown woods, and nursed me back to health with gentle baths and a sweet herbal tea that helped me sleep through most of the pain. How I wished for her gentle, reassuring touch now as lightning flashed and the Wilden grew closer. Over the sound of pounding rain, I could hear the Wilden's grunting calls. Luna was completely still beside me. I let my awareness expand. The Wilden were moving spots of pulsing red and black, the colors like static. Their energy seeped into me like smoke. It felt like suffocating. Heat grew in my belly, just as it had that last night in the caves, and I felt panic start to take control. In an attempt to slow my racing heart, I took deep, slow breaths, but it wasn't working. I had to calm down, to be as still and invisible as Luna. If I lost control, I didn't know what would happen to the woods, the animals in them, to Luna and me trapped beneath this tree. Part of me also worried that if the Wilden could do what I could do, if they were tracking me without their eyes and ears, then I was already lost. If they could find me like I had found them, then I knew they'd feel the roiling energy inside me and hear my heartbeat echoing through the earth. Thank you. That wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. So, does anybody have any questions or anything? 5 minutes for questions or comments about cats.
I have one question. Petrichor. I found that interesting because that's a more recent word, but then so many years in the future, it's like this archaic word. What inspired you to play with that notion?
Initially, the book was titled Petrichor because I just found it. It was some Facebook meme, and I just loved it. I loved the description of the word, and I loved just the way the word sounded. So when the title of the book changed, I was like, okay, I have to make sure it's in there somewhere. And that just seemed like a very visceral word that she might latch on to. I forgot to mention that she grew up in, there are 3 societies in the society that lives underground in caves. So until she's 8 or 9 or 10, she's never been above ground that she can remember. And wet earth is just an awful smell to her until she experiences it with her. So I thought that would be a nice twist of her, hating damp earth and wet and then getting to enjoy it. And it's a cool word. Yeah.
You read a version of this chapter at the end of the summer residency.
It may have been the chapter from the male's perspective.
I was going to say, this is a lot richer in details than I remember your reading. Does your writing become more dense and more atmospheric than when you revise it? I mean, do you sort of write from a skeleton and then fill in?
Well, at residency, I read from this book. It hasn't been revised since then, but the chapters alternate between Erilyn and Finn.
Okay.
And I think at residency, I read from Finn's perspective, where he was experiencing being chased, as opposed to, and his chapters are they're third person, so they're a little bit less. You can't get into the nitty gritty as much.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of rich detail of the scene.
Erilyn's very introspective, so I took a lot of liberties with writing all the little things that I like.
What inspired you to do one character in first person, but the other character in third?
Initially, it was just from Erilyn's point of view, and I wanted it to be first so I could really get into her head. And then I realized we needed Finn's point of view because he doesn't come in. They don't meet for a while. When they do, he's unconscious for a lot of it because he's injured. So I thought, well, we need something from him. And then I was like, well, I could write him in first, but it came across as her voice. So I thought, okay, I need to give the reader a clear delineation between the two anyway. So I thought I would try it, and it worked. So it's not second. One day I'll write a whole book in second person. No one will read it except me.
Did what is it?
Line by Lion.
Did
Yeah.
they help you editorially?
They did a copy edit. But no, a lot of the notes I got were from other writers that I would give it to. Trusted friend writers who gave me notes as I was writing and editing, and then they did copy editing stuff. Yeah. Is that it? One last question? Okay. Thank you guys so much.